Kia ora, no mai haere mai ki kuku te keruru. Ko Cherish Wilkinson ahau, Senior Māori Communications Advisor at Sport NZ, ihi Aotearoa. I'm pleased to be having a kōrero with Karen Vercoe today. Karen is the Chief Executive of Te Arawa Lakes Trust, the former Chair of Te Pūmautanga Aotearoa. She also sits on the iwi Chair's Forums Māori Sport and Iwi Leaders Group, the former Chair of the Data Iwi Leaders Group, and a current trustee of Te Kahui Raronga, a charitable trust responsible for implementing the mahi for the Data Iwi Leaders Group. She's a recognised iwi leader nationally and within Te Arawa, and was mandated to lead the COVID-19 response on behalf of Te Arawa Iwi and Hapu. Karen is a former director of Central North Island Iwi Holdings, representing 8 iwi owners of the largest contiguous forest in the Southern Hemisphere, and a trustee of the Ngāti Pikiao Iwi Trust. She's also an external director, part of the senior leadership team of the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. She's a former New Zealand double international sportswoman in rugby and touch. She previously served as an elected member on the Sport Industry Training Organisation Māori Board and the Oscar Foundation. She was also the author of Sport NZ's Māori Participation in Sport Review in 2017, and she received a New Zealand Order of Merit for services to governance and sport. She's also a recent appointment to the Sport NZ Ihi Aotearoa Board. Wow, what an impressive list, Karen. No mai hara mai. For those who are tuning into this Q&A, could you please let us know ko ai koe no hia koe?
Tēnā koe, Cherish, me koutou hoki. Ko matawhāora te maunga, ko rotuiti te mona, ko okere te awa, ko Ngāti Henukura te hapu, ko Ngāti Pikiao te iwi, ko Te Arawa te waka, ko Karen Vercoe, tōku ingoa. So Karen Vercoe, from the centre of my universe in Te Arawa, specifically a Rotorua Ngāti Pikiao. So it's nice to be here and have a bit of a chat.
Hi. So Karen, I suppose it's really fitting that we kind of talk to, given the amazing experience that you have over the years in leadership roles, both at a management and at a governance level. So what does the call for leadership mean for you?
I've been asked this question, a couple of times, and really for me, it's about continuing my whakapapa. So I'm really fortunate that my parents have always been involved in stuff to do with our iwi and also our marae. So my mum was the marae committee secretary for many years. Actually, fortunately, during the time when we had all of our kuia and kaumātua, our koike, still alive from back in the day. My dad has always worked at the pā, always done lots of stuff for our hapu, Ngāti Henukura, and also Ngāti Pikiao. And that's always happened for me all the way through our generations. My father's father, my koro, Richard Te Atakararia Vercoe, helped to relocate our marae, Pounamanui, from, Pukahina to where it sits at the moment on Lake Rotuiti at Ōtaramarae. My kuia, who is from Ngāti Tūwharetoa, Wahinaiti, she always served at the pā. My great-great-grandfather was a previous chair of the Te Arawa Māori Trust Board on my dad's side, and my other great-great-grandfather was a founding member of the Te Arawa Māori Trust Board. So, when you come from a whakapapa or service, it's kind of ingrown in you that you're there to serve too. So that's really what that's about, is continuing on the legacy of my whānau. And I'm very proud to continue on their legacy. So I'm just part of the link. And hopefully my children, my tamariki, my mokopuna will continue to do the same.
What have you learnt along the way? And who have been those key influences in your life?
Yeah, I think when I first got put into my formal governance, I was voluntold actually by my karaua, Kawana Nepia, who voluntold me to go onto the board of the Ngāti Pikiao Rūnanga. And I was in my 20s, so that was right at the time when I was really heavily playing sport and involved in representative touch and representative rugby, women's rugby. And I think, when you're younger, you don't really appreciate probably, but my koro put me in there. And so I kind of sat and held our sport portfolio for the runanga. And that was really the start of it, I guess. And then, I went and did my own, obviously I followed my own sporting journey. And then in between that, I had children. And so it's always been either my aunties and uncles or my nannies and koros that have put me into that role. And then probably more of my formal governance roles, particularly the kind of the iwi mandated roles, really came about as a result of my uncle Morris Miho, who's no longer with us, but he was the one really that, again, you get voluntold by your uncles. And so he just said to me, "Oh, niece, we're looking to put some new trustees onto the Ngāti Pākehā Iwi Trust, and I really want you to put your name forward. So this is the date. I need you to turn up. You're going to stand up in front of everyone and tell them what you've done, and then we'll work out how to get you on board." So, it's just been that, and then the opportunity as a younger person to sit beside some of our incredible leaders, and you learn their leadership techniques around when to really drive a kaupapa, when to sit back and allow others to be a part of the kaupapa, when to be facilitative, when to show empathy, when to be directive and to drive things. And so, I'm just the result of hanging around some really cool people, my kuia and karawa, and then also lots of others from our tribe.
Hi. If we take that experience that you've just shared and all of the different roles that you hold, what attitudes have you seen towards Māori or women in leadership roles over the years?
Yeah, I think so I was the first wahine chair of any of our post-settlement governance entities. So that was quite a big deal. And I came into the role when we were certainly under a lot of pressure. So I became the chairperson of Te Pūmaitanga Aotearoa in 2015. And really what that showed, first of all, I was surprised. So I didn't actually expect to be nominated. I can remember sitting there like getting a cup of tea thinking, I wonder who's going to get this job. I don't know what's going on, but who's going to get this? So first of all, I was surprised, but then, I think that there are times or there are periods of time or moments in time when it's just the right, everything kind of falls into place. And so for me, it demonstrated really our people's acceptance of having a wahine chair. I think it also demonstrated, probably from my male counterparts, the need to have maybe some wahine leadership that's very different. So it's not, patriarchal, it's more matriarchal. And then, of course, as the first wahine in the role, you obviously need to step up and own it. So I struggled a little bit with that in the first year, but had some really good support, and then obviously stayed in there from 2019 until this year when I resigned at 2022.
Let's fast forward then to your time with Sport NZ. So you were commissioned to undertake a review of Māori participation in sport, and maybe you just wanted just share with us how did you get involved in that mahi, and what did you sort of discover what as being some of the key concerns around what's happening in the sector and Māori participation?
I think so. When I was commissioned, it was I was commissioned, and I had a really frank conversation at that time with one of the executive team who was really keen to commission me, and I just was really frank and said, if you're looking for someone to tick the box, I'm not that consultant. So at that time, I was running my own consulting business. And based in Auckland at the time. And so he reached out to me and said, look, we'd be really keen to have a discussion with you, or at least for you to put in a proposal to undertake this piece of work. So I was really frank with him when we sat down and had a coffee. I just said, look, I'm passionate about the sector. I'm passionate and love our people. I think that, the way that our people have been engaged with in the past, really, if you look at it, we are one of the primary customer groupings that should really be focused on, not just because of te tiriti or not just because we're Māori, but actually because we're a group of people that love sport. And so sport, physical activity is actually natural for us to do. And so thankfully, Jeff, he said yes, and I said, okay, well, if we do this, then actually there needs to be some flexibility around me providing the report, because as you're contracting me, I remember that I have my own professional reputation in the sector, and so it's really important that I provide an authentic voice and provide authentic recommendations directly from the sector. So it was great. I got to talk with the majority of the national sporting organisations, and what I found was that they were really keen to engage more with Māori. They understood that this was probably a particular grouping that they did not have, I guess, the right capability in which to engage. They didn't know how to engage. So I was really impressed with the national sporting organisations I met with. Obviously, I met with all the Māori sports organisations who were hugely frustrated because at that time they've been really trying to get their own mana motuhake, but that hadn't been recognised by Sport New Zealand. And then I just got to meet with a whole lot of other groups. So I talked to Kura Kaupapa, I talked to the Hioranga Potama providers, and it was just, really, hopefully I was able to put their voice into the recommendations. And to Sport NZ's credit, they have pretty much implemented the majority of those recommendations. We've been able to see the good work that has been achieved internally in the organisation since 2017.
Yeah. So if we go into the review itself, and then this year we've launched Te Pāke and Te Aho, our Māori Outcomes Framework and Māori Activation Plan. So what are your observations of areas where we need to improve Māori participation? What really needs to happen?
Yeah, I think this really, to me, is a system issue. So in the past, the way that we have worked and operated, and obviously now I'm sitting on the Sports New Zealand board, so I have the ability to have direct input in terms of the strategic direction, in terms of where that's going. I think for me, it's just been really the ability to help to develop capability across the sector to be able to engage with our people. And when I talk about engaging with our people, what I mean is, the way in which a mainstream organisation might choose to engage with their Pākehā whānau was slightly different to the way in which they need to engage with our Māori whānau. And in fact, I suspect it's probably different. Might be more the same for engaging with our Pacifica whānau, with our ethnic whānau is the same as engaging with Māori. So, if you don't know, you don't know. And so part of our job inside of Sport New Zealand is to help to socialise what are those capability gaps, and then help to support the sector around how to do that. I think with the development of the outcomes framework now, we've got really specific sets of indicators and specific outcomes. So in the past, we were probably output driven. So definitely driven in terms of, activities, numbers, whereas now we're, not so focused on the outputs, but more focused on the outcomes. And so to my mind, this is just a natural progression. So this is a organisational progression. And now it's about putting, this is where the rubber meets the road, and how do we start to demonstrate those outcomes in terms of our investment.
So what's your advice for those who are in the sport, active recreation and play space or sector, especially in governance and directorship roles or leadership roles? Like, what's your advice for them when it comes to improving outcomes for Māori?
I think if we're focused on the outcomes, then actually the advice is pretty simple. So whatever the advice is that is given, really what we're saying is to follow that advice. And so it won't be like a cut and paste type of advice. And if I give you an example, so the iwi and Ngāpuhi, very large geographic area, The majority of their whānau actually are residing inside, in Tamaki Makaurau. And so there might be a slightly different way in which they, the sector chooses to engage with Ngāpuhi versus someone like, well, let's use us in Te Arawa, so very centralised. We've got really strong, we don't cover a massive geographical area. We've got strong hapu, strong hapu organisations, so the infrastructure already exists. And so for my mind, it's understanding the high level principles and concepts and then being able to apply those down at the individual waka or at the individual iwi level. And that's probably something that the sector will need to learn. I think the other thing too is that, in Māoridom, we've struggled to understand each other's kawa and tikanga. So there is no way that Pākehā are gonna understand it just like that. So we have to be, a little bit more forgiving and also a little bit more guiding in terms of the way in which they might try to engage. The other thing is, if you look at He Oranga Pautama staff, they sit inside of mainstream organisations, a lot of them, and so they don't have the ability, if you're sitting inside an iwi organisation, you have the strength and the support of an iwi. And so they mandate you to sit in that space. So if you think about Te Papatakoro or Te Arawa, they are actually mandated by Te Arawa to be our Māori sports organisation. The same with Mātātua. If you look at the different He Oranga Pautama kai whakahaere that sit inside the different, so if you think about our ones in Waikato Tainui, they are actually fully supported and mandated by the iwi. So again, it's a particular nuance around how you're responsive to the sector. But I think, we're sort of past the kohanga reo stage now. And now it's about us identifying that we've done the early foundational basics, and now it's time for us to lift our game, which is what I love about sport. We never, ever expect people to stay at the same level. We like being competitive. We like being the best. And so again, with our sector, it's about encouraging our sector to lift their game in terms of their engagement with Māori. And particularly now that Sport New Zealand has, so we've identified that we want to be true tiriti partners and everything that means. So, there will be some uncomfortable times, but essentially that's what myself and Farah are there for in Chelsea for high performance sport, is that we're there to help to enable that to happen. And certainly I think with the restructure and the new additional Māori staff that we'll bring on board will help to operationalise that for us.
Hi. Well, kia ora, Karen. I really appreciate your kōrero, and looking forward to having another one with you sometime further along the track. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi ki a koe e hoa.
Oh, tēnā koe, cherish.